like a pretty good little crowd here. Everyone can hear that? I can yell if you'd rather. I can be pretty loud. Turn it up? Oh, it's good, okay. All right, well, this means up in my world. All right, good. So, let me tell you a little about myself, I guess. Most of you already know who I am and could care less, but my name's Kevin Talbot. I live over in Kingston. I've been there for 35 years now. You're listening to me and you're saying he's not from Kingston, he's from Boston. And if anybody's here from Boston, maybe they can interpret for you what I'm saying up here. It's, you know, you'll get used to it. You know, you might sit there going, what did he say? I don't quite understand, but park the car, yeah. Pull over to the curb, drink some beer. But April is Poetry Month, in case nobody told. And the Seacoast Artists Association here has graciously invited me to come and read some of my grandmother's poetry. I have a couple of different books. We'll talk about the books. We'll talk about my grandmother. We'll talk about putting books together. We'll talk about my photography. I will show you some photographs of mine, and I'll try not to make everything drag out until you want to scream. Let's see, where should we start? I think I should start by reading you a little bit about my grandmother. Now, first off, I want to show you this book. This is the one that I've just compiled. Originally, this book, these are actually two of the original books that were made in the 1960s. My grandmother had her friends, she had quite a following. Her friends hand-typed these books, okay? The binding was done by hand. The cover was another friend, an artist that she knew, that painted these. These are called Indian pipes. Monotropa uniflora, for those of you who like to hear the Latin names, and for those of you who don't care, they're E pluribus unum. Indian pipes you can find in the damp woods, July and August. My grandmother called them ghost flowers. So that's where this title of the book comes from. There's one of her poems is entitled Ghost Flowers. I've kept the original cover, or reproduction of the original cover, with the name Ghost Flowers. There are 100 of her poems inside, dealing with mostly nature, but all sorts of things, as you can well imagine. And a little bit about my grandmother. She was born, let's see.
So the author noted on the cover is your grandmother?
Yes, Dorothy Evelyn Begg. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned her name. Yes, so let me just read a little bit. Now, I did not write this. This is an excerpt from another book. The book was The Spirit and Spa, a portrait of the body, mind, and soul of a 133-year-old spiritualist community in Lake Pleasant, Massachusetts. Now, Lake Pleasant is a beautiful little village and part of Montague, Massachusetts, and it's right next to Greenfield, Mass, if you know where Greenfield is. So, in the turn of the century, now late 1800s into the early 1900s, This was a spiritualist camp that was very well attended by hundreds of spiritualists. Most of them came from New York or Boston. A lot of them had a lot of money. A lot of them were dirt poor, but they all got together here because they all believed in the afterlife and our ability to speak with those who have gone on before us. Now, my grandmother was a medium. She was well known, and she eventually began to deal in a type of mediumship called psychometry, which is basically you would visit her. Now, maybe some of you have had your tarot read or your palm read or something similar. When you visited her, she would take an object of yours, like say your wedding ring, and take it and hold it, and she would take her readings from that. Now, the one thing that separated her from everybody else that did this sort of thing was that she never charged a penny for her services. This actually caused a lot of ire among the other people who were trying to make a buck at it, but people, still chose my grandmother over anybody else because her readings, they felt, were good and accurate, and on and on. I'll just read you a little excerpt from this other book, Spirit and Spa. Dorothy Evelyn Begg was born June 21st, 1898, the daughter of Hiram Edward and Eva Woodruff Conant. She was the first baby born in Lake Pleasant and the only child born in Lake Pleasant until after World War I. At 18, she married Robert Burns Begg, a former sergeant major in the British Army who fought in the Boer Wars in South Africa. Begg's great-great-grandfather, John Begg, was the brother-in-law of Scottish poet Robert Burns, and married to Robert's wee sister, the youngest of 7, Isabella Burns Begg. The Beggs lived in Greenfield, Mass. For a while after they were married. Before moving to a farm in Bernardston, Mass., Mr. Begg became seriously ill in 1940. Knowing that she would not be able to operate the farm herself, Mrs. Begg orchestrated the family's relocation to Lake Pleasant, where she had been born. It goes on and on. There is this excerpt from this book that is at least a chapter, maybe a little longer, written specifically about my grandmother by Louise Shattuck, who was another medium there at Lake Pleasant, much younger than my grandmother. Also in this book, I've added, and it's transcripts of an interview that was done with my grandmother by a Hampshire College student named Kathleen Vedder. Sometime in the 70s, she came and interviewed my grandmother and recorded everything. Somebody painstakingly took the recordings and put them into typewritten form so that I could copy them into this book. I cannot give that person credit, but thank you to them because I don't know who it was. But so the book is compiled 100 of my grandmother's poems, the exact same poems which appeared in this original book from the 60s. How many of those original ones actually exist, I have no idea. I have 2. I think my brother has 1, and there's 2 or 3 cousins that possibly have 1, and that might be it in the whole world. So she was, in my eyes, she was a really good poet, but she was unrecognized for her poetry. She was more well known for her mediumship. Okay, I think that covers that pretty well. This, some of you may have seen before. It's been around for about 20 years now, maybe a little longer. I'm trying to think of one, 2002, I think it was published. I self-published. So there's a learning curve when you want to make a book, and we all go through learning curves, and we all, you know, usually do the wrong thing first, and then we learn from our mistakes, and then we move on. So I took 24 of these poems from that book, the original book, and put them in here with my photographs. And this is the book that you see now. I have thousands of these. So if you know anybody that might want one, they can have one, because I basically have given up on trying to make money off of them, which was probably a foolish idea in the first place. Now they are available here in the gallery, and I asked for a $10 donation to the gallery, which goes specifically into their scholarship fund. Now, if you don't know anything about this gallery, it's a nonprofit organization, and one of our main purposes, outside of showing 30 or so different artists have their work here, that is one of our goals, is to raise money for a scholarship fund for the local kids. And this book now is specifically going to that purpose. So for a $10 donation, boom, boom, and you're doing something good, you're making me happy, you're clearing out all the boxes of these in my basement, and doing something back for the community. So now, I guess I'll quickly note that this is printed under a much different situation, that nowadays there's companies, and I used a company called Lulu, which prints this book on demand, so I don't have to order 1,000 copies of them and get stuck with 1,000 copies of them. So you can actually go online and order this book from them, and they handle the shipping for me. They do everything. They print the book, they put it in a bag, they ship it to you. You pay me online or send me a check or whatever. So that's a much better way of doing things than to go and you know, go ahead and print 1,000 of them at your own expense. All right, moving along. I keep losing. This will come back in a second. Maybe. Hello, there we go. All right. Let's start with one of her poems called I Know a Wood. And let's find it in the book here. And you'll see my photographs will follow along with the story kind of well, maybe not, I don't know. I know a wood. I know a wood where violets grow on winding paths of green, hedged in by pine and sturdy oak and tiny birch between. A river runs on swift blue feet close to this wood I know. You should see my apple tree drift blossoms there like snow. You should watch the spangled waves rush onward to the sea and catch the fragrance in the air from pine and cedar tree. And though you lingered there for all the brief life of these things, yet would your heart insatiate leap on to other springs. Okay. So the timing may be a little off. Might have to look at a few more pictures than I am actually still reading, but that's part of the fun of it, right? I tell the other story, I guess, that I should mention is that I have an enormously wide website called Ghost Flowers, so you can find it on the internet, ghostflowers.com, and if you can't remember that, I have some business cards in the back which have all the information on them. There's more photographs on that website than you could ever possibly imagine looking at. I've been doing this for, I don't know, 25 or 30 years working on this. There's loads of pictures from hiking in the mountains. There's loads of pictures. Basically, what I like to shoot is nature and wildlife. So you will find tons of those pictures. For the past, I don't know, going on close to 15 years, I've been doing what I call a daily photo. So each day I've got a photo from that day on the website. There's galleries with, 365 photos in each gallery of shots that I've took every single day in that year. There's all sorts of things. There's everything from little red newts to barred owls and great horned owls, snowy owls, eagles, osprey, birds particularly being one of my focuses that I like to photograph. I have a lot of fun at it. Moving along, let's do the next one. This one's called A Mountain. You might know one or two. A mountain. I know a mountain that holds a river in its arm, whose mother breast keeps tenderly wee slender birches warm. I know a mountain crowned with laurel, pink and white, that gleams a friendly shadow against the velvet night, whose mighty song the wind gods catch and blow adown the world, whose hearty breath is caught in tears to see the fern fronds curled, whose lovely swift and sure foot down countless moss-grown trails, whose patient trees uphold the snows, whose springtime never fails. I know a mountain that holds communion with the stars, receives the thrust of centuries, and blooms to hide its scars. Oh, may I, like my mountain, and with faith serene and high, conceal my wounds with blossoming against whatever sky.
Right on with the timing.
For once. Now this poem is called Freedom, and my grandmother died of cancer, and I think everybody in the room knows what cancer does, and sometimes it's a long, drawn-out, very sad death. And she was laying in her hospital bed, and she looked out the window and she saw this hawk circling. And she wrote this poem on her deathbed. Freedom. I saw a hawk this morning flying wild and free, and knew he carried on his wings a bit of you and me. He flew the sunrise rose and blue, clear to the sky's far rim, and oh, how my longing heart followed after him. Straight to the gates of heaven, standing now ajar, where waits the longed-for freedom, denied earth's sad dark star. Some of our local hawks, yeah.
What kind of hawk is it?
I believe that is a juvenile red-tailed hawk, but sometimes they're really hard to tell. It could also be a red-shouldered hawk. Not an expert on them. I try to identify them correctly, but it's a difficult job, really. There's ornithologists that will argue continuously about what type of hawk is in a picture. So I try to do my best and go from there. Which one did I pick? What did I pick here? Okay. Oh, let's go on and read Ghost Flowers, since that's the name of our books here. All I got to do is find it. I know it's in here. Okay. Ghost Flowers. The poets all sing the rose in bloom, the foreign lilac's fragrant plume, the lily's pure and regal white, the cereus rare that blooms by night, the bosky dell, the ferned glade, the violet that lights the shade, the daisy and the buttercup that lift the drooping spirit up, the vibrant song of thrush in wood, the magic charm of solitude. But let my wayward fancy boast to find among the wooded ways, pale and fragile as a ghost, the Indian pipe of childhood days. Now, who has seen those before? Everybody? Yeah, everybody's seen those before, right? So now, you know, now you got a new name for them. Now you can call them ghost flowers, okay? It's all fun. Oops, let's not play that one again. And I didn't want to spend a lot of time doing this, so I've got about a half dozen poems here, and I'm going to open things up to questions and so forth. We can go back and look at some of the pictures if you care to. I don't, whatever you want to do here. I'm not going to keep you here all day, but we could give you a little poetry shot, and we'll go from there, all right? All right, now what do we got here? Hoarfrost, okay. And we all know what hoarfrost is. We probably woke up to a little bit of it yesterday morning, and it went, ugh. And we've all had it with hoarfrost and snow and everything else, cold and wet, right? But it's part of life here in New England, and we just deal with it the best we can. All right. Hoarfrost. Hoarfrost settles in the night, and dazzling in the dawn's first light, the fairy rings of white-starred leaves stand in weird and crystal sheaves. Down in the lowlands the hedges shine, transfixed in beauty by the rime. The river reeds new color take, where lordly swims the spotted drake. First frost of autumn, last call to bloom, the flowers march in glory to their doom. Crystal banners to the wind they go, breathless beauty in the final throw. The partridge drum on a distant hill, fall is born, and the world is still. These are actually photographs from Powwow Pond, where we live over in Kingston. Yeah, there's some beautiful cedar bogs over there, and they just look so beautiful in the snow. Oftentimes, if we're lucky, the pond will freeze well enough we can walk over to the bogs and take a walk over in there, snowshoe, and it's just amazing place. Probably not known to everybody around, but Kingston and Powwow Pond and the Powwow River, these cedar bogs are northern Atlantic white cedar, which is not a really common type of tree, and the ones in Kingston, the forests in Kingston, are some of the largest in the state, and they really, if you get a chance to kayak or to snowshoe over there. They're worth going to see. Really nice. No. Reassurance. Now this one, my grandmother wrote for my mother. And again, while she was getting ready to die. Reassurance. When purple finches come again, if I'm not there to see, may they remind you that my soul has wings of liberty. May all the lily bells of spring ring out my love anew and bring the joy that my heart knows to all your ways and you. Carry springtime in your heart, give time some fairy wings, and let your days be fragrant with tiny blossomings. When purple finches bloom again like roses in the snow, rejoice that God will find a way to let me see and know. And Lily of the Valley. And that's probably really a house finch, but purple finch, house finch, she's close, she's purple, you know.
Purple finch is not really purple anyway.
No, right? So, no, I mean,
I would have believed you. You didn't have to tell me.
you get a lot of that, actually.
It crushed me now, Kevin, that you told me that wasn't a purple. That's broken.
Terrible, terrible. I'm so cruel sometimes. This one is called Waterfall. Look at that, I'm open right to the right page. I don't have to fumble with the book. This is called Waterfall. When Moses was a little lad and Pharaoh's daughter young, this gorge was old and mammoth, and from it mosses hung. Crystals gleamed on these damp walls when Jericho crashed down, and waters splashed and murmured loud with tongues of Babylon. Down and down the waters fell, loud and long they sang, 1,000 years but as a day, as wild the welkin rang. Long days shape the jagged rock to forms grotesque and bold, shapes that water smoothed to jade before the stone was cold. Some of these places you may recognize if you're familiar with the White Mountains. Some of the... I don't think so.
Okay.
No,
I can't tell if it looked like it.
Champney and Saturday and yeah, I'm not really sure. All you might recognize some of the faces in there as Emma and Wicket. Oh yeah, and Judy. And if and Blue and Tebow were there too. Good, good. I was busy reading. I couldn't tell really. You know, forget what pictures I used. So good. Now this one, Night Sounds. This is kind of a fun one, but I used photographs of loons, I believe, and loons is one of my favorite things to photograph. In 2015, we bought a camp up north, and there was a little pond right near it that had a pair of loons that would raise chicks every year. And at the time, I was pretty near crippled. I couldn't walk. I was in a lot of pain. I couldn't even sleep. It was so painful, but I had a hip that needed to be replaced. And eventually, later in that year, I got it replaced. But to entertain myself, I would drag the kayak down to this little pond and just sit in the sun for hours and watch the loons. And they really They really saved my life, saved my sanity there. It was great to be with them. And if you've ever heard the loons, and if you've ever just been laying in a tent or in a camp or wherever you are, and you hear the loon in the night calling, it's just, I'm sure you remember it. It's a beautiful thing. In fact, let's go back a little bit, and I can even tell you this. Let's see. Maybe you can hear this. Maybe you can't. I don't know. All right. So that's called a hoot, and they have several different calls, and the hoot is usually how the parents communicate with the chicks. Now this might be more familiar to you. That call is kind of you've probably heard that one before. And then I'll sneak over here. And that is called a yodel, and that is usually some sort of sign of distress. One of the parents sees an eagle fly over, or maybe I'm getting too close in the kayak, and we try not to make them make that sound while we're in the kayak. We try to give them as much room as possible. And this one is, that's the one you know, probably, if you've heard them. And they will call back to each other on the ponds with that sound. So, pretty neat. Those aren't my recordings. I wish they were, but okay. Now, let's get along to our little poem here. Again, night sounds. Whoops. I didn't use loons, I used owls. I know the loons are coming up somewhere. Night sounds. Country dusk is filled with sound from the air and from the ground. Tiny flutings strike the ear, trumpeting the atmosphere. Bat wings whir and beetles snip. On the rose leaf dines the thrip. Locusts shrill and wasps close in. Death is swift and sure as sin. Hylas call from bog to bog, answered by old Grandpa Frog. Cheeping birds seek swaying nests, dying sunlight on their breasts. Across the lake, on the hill, keens the lonely whippoorwill. Put out the cat, enough's been said, crickets chirp me up to bed. And perhaps you've been laying in bed at night and heard an owl. So there are some of my owls. Sorry about the loon mess up. It's all fun, and I know you're all right there with me. So, okay, here's the loons. And you know, I could have told by the little thumbnail picture here that what I was doing. Yeah, what is this one? Nocturne. Okay, so nocturne. Some of you English majors could be looking at that and saying, "There's no e on the end of nocturne," but I discovered, and my grandmother had it correctly in her book, that the E comes if it's a song or a poem about the evening and so forth. So, there's your little English lesson. Nocturne. Whoops, you know, I should find the corresponding poem. Here we go. Now, this one has loons for those of you who have been waiting to see loons. Nocturne. The waters of the blue lagoon are quiet now beneath the pallid moon. The heron stands a guard above his nest, and one by one the little water creatures have caught their meal and gone to rest. And I, immortal, stand and watch it all, tall black grasses by the water's edge, reaching upward out of habit to the sky, without whose fierce protective light their stalks must bleach and wilt and die. The pale stars trembling in the void are witness to the century's trend. The stars and I alone may know the journey's end. The moon behind a cloud is lost to view. Uneasy in the quiet, the heron moves. The high, shrill voices of the night resent the darkness and the sound. And all about me in the pulsing night, the little cares of day are drowned. So that kind of relates to me. The little cares of days are drowned. As I sat in my kayak and I photographed these guys. You see them in different stages here. They're born with the black natal fuzz that you see on the very young ones, and then as they grow, they start to lose that. It turns brown, and then they start to lose it, and eventually their gray-colored feathers will come out. There's a good example of them. So that's in their first year. You see, they get a little ragged looking as they're losing the baby fuzz. Yep, teenagers losing the baby fuzz and getting real feathers now. And honestly, the mother and father, they just spend their whole lives when the chicks are growing, feeding those chicks. And it just, the fish start out little tiny fish, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until you see a loon swallowing a fish that you can't even believe. And you imagine yourself trying to put a whole Moe's sub down your throat all at once. That's basically what they can do, which is really an amazing thing. And they've been around for, depending on what you believe, they've been around for millions of years, unchanged. They were, perfect creatures. They really haven't evolved. They spend all their time on the water. You very seldom see them on land, except to nest, and their nest is always right adjacent to the water. So if you've ever seen them fly, they're not real good flyers. They can barely move themselves on land. They're built, in fact, they are more related to a penguin than they are to a duck, okay? So their legs are built way in the back, and if they knew how to, they could stand on their legs and walk like penguins, but they don't do that. But they're really amazing creatures and deserve our respect and deserve to be left alone when we see them, unlike what I do. But do as I say, not as I do. All right. What else have we got? Contentment. Okay. Let's find that in here. Good thing this is a short book. Gratitude. Oh, come on. Oh, there we go. All right. It's April. The first New Hampshire wildflowers are starting to show themselves. If you're very careful and you know where to look, you can find some in the woods right now. The ones, the main ones that are coming out are one in particular called hepatica, which is one of the very first ones. It's a very beautiful, tiny flower, probably no bigger than my thumbnail. And sometimes they grow in clumps, sometimes they grow by themselves singularly. You usually find many in the same area. Other ones that you would see now are called Spring Beauty. There's not a native one, but it's naturalized, came here from Europe, and now we see it here all the time. It's called Colt's Foot. But this particular poem, I've used the hepatica so that you can see the different colors and arrangements that it likes to plant itself in. And that's what it looks like as it's starting out. Contentment. I have a little garden in a quiet little street, and all its paths are cockle-shelled, and all its blossoms sweet. I have a little garden, and when the sun is high, on every little flower sways a butterfly. I have a little garden, and when the moon is low, down every little pathway the fireflies glow. I have a little garden in a quiet little street, where all of heaven waits my homing feet. So these are out now in the woods if you're in the right place. They don't grow just anywhere. A lot of times they're just you can see the different shades from this deep dark purple, and then there's a lighter one that's almost white, and depending on the light they can look different. They're just really beautiful little flower, and honestly that whole clump I could hold in the palm of my hand right there. So they're out now if you get out and look. Oops, no, come here. We'll save that one for last. Okay, I've got one more. Now I've got some more audio here for you. We don't have to watch the whole thing, but I didn't know, maybe some of you needed to hear this. This film doesn't do much but bring you the audio. Can you hear them? You hear them? Everybody knows what that is, right? Okay. The peepers. The peepers. Or it could be aliens landing, I'm not sure, but... all right. So that's fun. You get the idea.
I always look forward to the peepers in the spring.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I got older, they went away.
Yeah.
And I got hearing aids, and they came back.
And they came back. It's amazing, isn't it? Well, I couldn't walk. They gave me a new hip. I can walk again. All right? It's amazing what they can do now. And I know there's several people here in the front that have had knee replacements and hip replacements and so forth. So, yeah, it's all good. All right, we'll move on. But happy spring, everybody. Okay, and this is the last poem I've prepared here. So, if you're getting itchy, it's almost over. Now this one, if I can find it. Maybe not. There it is. All right. Now this is called The Hunted, and I think you'll recognize, whoops, that didn't work. That wasn't good. Let's see if we can fix that. I'm going to start that over again. There we go. The hunted. These matted mosses to the hunters show where lately lodged the buck and doe. The torn limp leaves and nibbled bark help speed the huntsman to his mark. These heart-shaped hollows in the snow betray the hunted hoof and toe. With bounding grace to fleetness born, the stag outruns the hunter's horn. But deep in brambles, his dappled wife spills the fragrance of her fern-sweet life. Held in death's omnivorous embrace, God looks up into the hunter's face. I love deer. Not because they're tasty. And we're fortunate to have this little, actually there's two different Bambis here that I shot very near to this gallery, right here in Exeter. Yeah, they were out in the pouring rain one morning and decided to show themselves. That's close by too. All these are very local. Had a lot of fun getting these shots. That's mostly what I get to see. Young pair and the old guy hiding in the tall grass. All right, that's kind of it for what I've got to show you. Thank you very much. That's really unnecessary. I don't deserve it. All the credit goes to my grandmother. I guess I can open up for any questions if anybody's got anything, or if there's any particular photos that they saw that they want to talk about. Rich.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that group that your grandmother was a part of?
I can.
Yeah.
Well, as I said before, at the turn of the 20th century, 20th? We're in the 21st now? Whatever century. From the late 1800s to the early 1900s, Lake Pleasant was a spiritualist community. Now, people, a lot of rich people and also a lot of poor people, they'd all go to this place called Lake Pleasant. There were numerous mediums there. Touting their skills. They would have spiritual get-togethers, talk. There would be speakers that would come. They would do seances. They would do all these sorts of things, and basically the entire summer they would spend there at the lake, enjoying life, making life fun. They each had built little cottages. They would line the streets with Japanese lanterns, so there was a glow going on at the night. There was a bandstand. They would have bands play almost every night. There would be somebody there playing. The train station was right there in the village, so the people were coming by train to visit this place from Boston, from New York, from wherever they came from.
Where is it? Where's that place?
It's in a town called Montague, Massachusetts, which is right near Greenfield. There is still a small group of spiritualists who live in Lake Pleasant, and there is still, this isn't the temple that my grandmother belonged to, that one burned down, unfortunately, as did most of Lake Pleasant. There was a terrible fire in, I don't know, the 20s maybe, that destroyed most of the village, but some of the original cottages are still there. My grandmother's cottage is still there on Denton Street, and the Spiritual Alliance that is still there, the temple is still there. Now, there's sort of two different parts to the village, and there's a big gully between them, and so if I was standing at my grandmother's front porch looking, the lake would be in front, and over to the right is this big gully, and you go over to the other part of the village where the post office and most of the action was over on the other side of the village. Now, back in the day, there was a bridge that crossed this gully, and it fell into disrepair. Eventually, they had to tear it down. And in the 70s, mid-70s, and in fact, for the bicentennial, 1975 and 76, my uncle, who was just at the time recently retired, he was a chief master sergeant in the Army, retired from the Army, and he got together enough people and enough interest, and they raised enough money to rebuild this bridge. So it's a wooden footbridge across this gully from one side of the village to the other, with an incredible view out over Lake Pleasant. And we were just there this past summer, and it's still beautiful. Now, to raise money for this bridge, for the footbridge, they sold. Now, a lot of times you'll see engraved bricks in the sidewalk, you know. So instead, their idea was they had engraved pickets for the picket fence, which lines both sides of the bridge across the gully. And myself, my kids, my parents, my brothers and sisters all have their names on pickets on this fence across. And it's a really beautiful spot. And if you do ever get a chance to go out there, they still have meetings on Sundays at the temple, and even just to go over there and to walk around, it's really quite an interesting place.
Kevin?
Yes?
Would you equate it to heading?
I don't really understand heading, but yeah, I've never been in there, but yeah, it could be very similar. And I believe, what do you know about heading, Cheryl? Nothing? No, I thought, okay. For some reason, they're Methodists? Yeah, yeah. So it is still a type of spiritual camp that they meet at. I wouldn't equate Methodist with what my grandmother was doing, but I don't really know the religion, so I can't really say much about it. But yeah, heading could be similar. This spiritual alliance was the first one in the United States, so it is why so many people were involved with it at the beginning, back in the day. And now it's really kind of grown to, everything over there is kind of in disrepair, and they really don't have the backing nowadays. But what church does, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's still a good place to visit. Anyone else? Dave?
I just Googled it, and I see Mount Pleasant, Lake Pleasant on there,
Yeah.
and the bridge is labeled as the Bridge of Names.
Yes, the Bridge of Names, that's correct. And that was my uncle, my mother's brother, obviously, the son of Dorothy, was the one who got that together, and they rebuilt that bridge back 25, 50, how are we talking over 50 years ago. Yeah. We were there last summer for the 150th anniversary of the Spiritual Alliance there in Lake Pleasant. So that was good.
Still in the family?
No, I wish. I actually, while they were having their 150th celebration last year, they had little posts out in front of each of the houses with a little explanation with the history of the cottages, who they had belonged to, and so forth. And my grandmother's, they spoke of her in the little blurb that was on the post in front of the place. And I was with one of my cousins who happened to know the woman and her husband that live in the cottage now, so I was able to go up and at least meet them and stand on my grandmother's porch again, which I hadn't been able to do since I was, I don't know, maybe 12 years old, you know, so it was really kind of interesting. And I can remember being there with my parents, and mostly it was like, just go outside and play, will you? You know, go on, go visit the forest, go visit the lake, you know. And so I didn't really know my grandmother as well as you might think, but I knew her pretty well, and I got to stay with her without my parents once in a while. And you know, it was always interesting, and she was always, and I can remember her standing on the porch one time, and she's scolding the wind. And I'm 10 years old, and and she's like, listen, wind, we want to sit out here on the porch, and I need you to stop now. I need you to stop. And then a blue jay squawked or something, and she would be like, oh, you keep quiet. You're always causing trouble. And I'm 10 years old, and I'm looking at her like she is Looney Tunes, you know. But I understand it now, and I've grown, and that really kind of got infused into me and is really part of who I am now. It's just like the nature and the love of nature and the observing of nature and its creatures, and I just don't know any other way now. It started with her. It started with my mom, who was very similar to her, and I owe who I am to these strong women, along with a few strong men. But I would put the women first, really, you know, because they're the ones that make you into a decent person, I think. So if I can be considered decent, I don't know, maybe. So I've got a number of these. Anybody that wants one, I believe they're back there on the high top. I can sign them if you'd like. $10 donation goes straight to the scholarship fund. This one is also available. This one is $20.
Some of them here.
Yes, I've got some of these here. They will, a portion of the proceeds from these will also go to the gallery. So that's what we got. I suppose I could read just a little bit more. Try not to bore you to death. I'll just read you the back cover off of this. My grandmother, Dorothy Evelyn Begg, was an excellent but sadly unrecognized poet. This book is a reproduction of her original book, Ghost Flowers, which contained 100 of her poems. It was never really published, though several hand-bound copies were made and distributed to friends and family, 2 of which are now in my possession, I showed you. I do not know how many were actually made or how many still exist. I've already told you all of this, but a review. She was born and grew up in the spiritualist community of Lake Pleasant, Montague, Mass., and became a well-known medium there. She practiced in psychometry, also known as token object reading. It is a form of extrasensory perception characterized by the claimed ability to glean accurate knowledge of a person's history by making physical contact with an object belonging to them. Later in life, she would correspond with folks from all over the world who had heard of her abilities through word and mouth. Written letters from these people were used to make the reading. Then in a return letter, she would describe what she had read of their lives, past and present. So the psychometry business is there. These people would write her a letter, and now she has something from that person that she can hold and do the reading from. So that's how she did it, and she corresponded like that. So literally thousands of people, I won't start name dropping, but some very famous people would write to her for a reading, and she would do it. Her friend Barbara Adam, which lived with her for many years, would type the response and they'd mail it off. So they had a huge I don't know the proper word, but they had a huge following. And at the end, when my grandmother was passing away, I can remember my parents, and she said, you have to do this. We didn't want to do it, but you have to do this. This is all private stuff. All these letters, they need to be destroyed. And I can remember having bags and bags of letters, and my father just throwing them in the fireplace, you know, all this stuff. But it was all private and personal things. It was about these people's lives that, you know, so a great loss there, but it, you know, it was the right thing to do. A lengthy interview with Mrs. Begg about life in the village of Lake Pleasant and follows her poems in this book. The book also contains an excerpt from Spirit and Spa. It was written by Louise Shattuck in collaboration with David James. David James is now in his 80s, but is still the driving force behind the spiritual alliance that is still there in Lake Pleasant. Also, the technical help and unending patience of my friend Ron Gammon, without whom the project never would have come to fruition. I've been able to complete the materials in this book and make it available for the first time to the public. So that's the story of the book of my grandmother. And unless there's any more questions, we can end. Sure.
Anybody else in the family have the gift?
Yes. Yeah, I have a brother who does readings. I won't talk about myself, but those who know me well know I'm a little bit different. And it's because I'm walking in a different world than they are, but there could be a lot of explanations for that. But yeah, it is passed on.
Awesome.
So my brother didn't realize his gift until he was probably in his 60s. So yeah. So, but yeah, they still going on in the family.
Just like you made a living, Kev?
More or less, yeah. I mean, I believe she did have some small pension from her husband and, of course, Social Security, and her friend Barbara Adams had some sort of pension from the company that she had worked for. So they scratched out a living. Now, let me tell you, the cottage that they lived in there was no insulation. There was no furnace. They lived there year-round. They heated the place with the huge wood stove, cooking stove in the kitchen. And they just spent their days in that kitchen. The writing table was on one side of the kitchen, and also used to eat from. And, you know, they kept this stove stoking 24 hours a day. they roughed it. They roughed it. And the cottage, visiting it now, it hasn't changed. I'm sure there's been upgrades. I hope it has heat in it now, you know, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, just this side of barely having running water, you know. So, yeah, she really roughed it there. Yeah.
If somebody was, like, employing your grandmother or whatever you want to call it, what were they actually looking for from her? What was the object of this?
A lot of it was looking for messages from departed loved ones, you know, like you would find in a seance. But a lot of it also was questions that they had about life and about spirituality and, you know, what are the answers here in this universe to all these questions that I have? What does happen after we die? What, you know, and where were we before we were born? And all these things that, you know, that honestly we will probably never know until we take that journey. But yeah, she would talk about all sorts of things. She would do, one of the things people wanted to know a lot was reincarnation is a large part of the spirituality thing. They believe that we return when we die, and that the lessons learned here will pay forward into our next lives as we come back. And a lot of people wanted to know about their former lives. And you know, whether she was telling them what they wanted to hear, or if she had some sense of accuracy towards, you know, who they were in previous lives, then she could pass that on to them. All really interesting stuff. Yeah. So it's not as big in the United States, or at least I don't know of it being as big now. But we all know of people like Gene Dixon, if you remember, and I forget who the president was at the time, but they would get readings from her, from Gene Dixon. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it was. I think you're right. But yeah.
There's a spiritualist camp in Northport, Maine, that's been going continuously since the 1800s.
Really, yeah.
It's right on the Penobscot Bay.
And Northport. I know there's one up there, Etna, my brother belongs
It's a
to.
little further up.
So further up, yeah,
So it's called Temple Heights, so you can Google it.
yeah, yeah. They're interesting people, and you know, like every religion, they thought they had the one true religion. You know, so more power to them. I don't tie myself into any religion. I sort of just take the best bits out of all of them and try to live my life that way, you know. But, you know, they've all got something to teach us. They do. So, any more questions? Anything I can straighten out? Any questions about photographs? Cheryl?
The flowers, the little flowers that are out in the woods.
Yeah.
Those, I had thought they were extinct because in New York, when I grew up, we used to have a patch of those.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the little cliffs in the shale.
Yeah, yeah,
And then they disappeared. And they haven't been back for years.
yeah.
And so to see them in your photograph was like so exciting. It's like they're still here. They're not extinct.
Oh,
And
no.
I didn't know what they were called.
Yeah,
I just knew where they came out every spring. I would go look for them.
yeah, yeah.
And they came out before the violets and all that, so I was just really excited.
Yeah.
So now I want to go find them.
No.
I missed the beginning, was she talking about the hepatica?
Yeah, the hepatica. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a beautiful little flower for sure. All right, I guess we can wrap up. taking up your time. I appreciate you all coming out on another miserable New England day. You know, we do what we can. Tomorrow's going to be better, right? Supposed to sun come out, be in the 60s. I hope you can all get out and enjoy it a little bit. You're welcome. Thank you.